practice of chlorination was intended to disinfect the water, while the practice of fluoridation was intended to strengthen the teeth of consumers. This practice of mass manipulation of public water originated in the US and England. It is now steadily spread to many other developed nations of the world. However, several minority groups have spoken out against this practice to demand exemption from it. The claims of these minority groups often overlap and may be difficult to distinguish. However, they may be categorized as religious concern, health concern, and cultural concern. These are primarily represented by Christian scientists, people with chemical sensitivities, and ethnic groups. Shannon Murphy, an employee of TST Water and president of the Pacific Water Quality Association, says, "I have found that the US is pretty split 50-50 as to fluoride in the water. About 50% of the population do not want it in the water." And so we must ask, to what extent does the government have a responsibility to protect the rights of minorities in regards to the addition of substances, such as fluoride and chlorine, that are not naturally found in water? According to the Federal Panel on Community Water Fluoridation of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the optimal concentration of fluoride in drinking water is the concentration that provides the best balance of protection from dental caries while limiting the risk of dental fluorosis. For these community water systems that add fluoride, the U.S. Public Health Service now recommends an optimal fluoride concentration of 0.7 milligrams per liter. The earlier PHS recommendation for fluoride concentrations was based on outdoor air temperature of geographic areas and ranged from 0.7 to 1.2 milligrams per liter. According to Shannon Murphy, the closer someone lives to the water treatment plant, typically the higher their chlorine level is in the water due to water treatment facilities needing to ensure there is some residual chlorine disinfectant in the water at the end of the distribution line. But the ever-changing recommendations of science and politics, as well as the mistakes made when regulating the addition of chemicals and the inherent inconsistency of dosages in the system, have negatively affected a variety of individuals, from healthy people to those with sensitivities to the chemicals. The case of Paul Aikenhead versus Borough of Westview, which was settled in November of 1978, resulted in the Allegheny County judge prohibiting the practice of the fluoridation of public water in the borough of Westview, Pennsylvania. The judge declared in writing that doing so was simple prudence, because the evidence presented showed that fluoride was a carcinogen. Hence, it may be considered unethical to force citizens to utilize a practice that they believe is harmful to them, despite the nature of their reasoning. In Sweden, where drinking water directly from the tap is a cultural normality, the practice of fluoridation has been discontinued. It is speculated by anti-fluoride activists that the example of continental Europe shows the widespread unease over the health impact of fluoride. Dr. Arvid Carlsson of Sweden, a neuropharmacologist and recent Nobel Prize recipient for medicine, strongly voiced concerns regarding the medical ethics of water fluoridation and assisted in leading a successful campaign that stopped the practice of water fluoridation in Sweden. Dr. Carlsson is quoted saying, "I am quite convinced that water fluoridation, in a not too distant future, will be consigned to medical history. The addition of drugs to the drinking water means exactly the opposite of an individualized therapy, not only in that the dose cannot be adapted to individual requirements. It is, in addition, based on a completely irrelevant factor, namely consumption of drinking water, which varies greatly between individuals and is, moreover, very poorly surveyed." Hence, the Swedish government opted to work with those that demanded exemption from the practice of fluoridation because it agreed that it was a matter of personal choice, personal needs, and scientific intervention. The Swedish government not only took responsibility for the failings of the practice, it took action. However, the teeth of the Swedes will not suffer from this change due to their access to quality healthcare for all citizens. They do not need to rely on the practice because of their other methods of improving dental health. All countries have some amount of support and backlash for their policies and procedures regarding fluoridation and chlorination. This issue is currently being addressed in a variety of ways. These ways often work in combination with one another. The general pathway taken by countries that fluoridated or chlorinated their water at the time of opposition may be summarized as such. While all levels of change are important, the end goal is always governmental intervention, which is closely related to, and often contingent on, scientific intervention and cultural intervention. Central Asia, for example, has a historically based, slightly superstitious, traditional cultural belief that cautions against consuming water due to the fear that it will transmit diseases. In addition, The scientific community has acknowledged that the levels of fluoride that already naturally occur in the water are suitable. Thus, the vast majority of modern Asia does not fluoridate its water at all. Drinking tap water in Sweden, however, is a cultural normality. In addition, the Swedish and global scientific communities have already expressed concerns regarding the process of fluoridation. Thus, the Swedish government has ceased its water fluoridation programs. Using these areas as examples, a pattern of change may be analyzed. Generally, either cultural intervention or scientific intervention will be easier, and thus occur before the other in each country. This will cause the government to eventually take action and, thus, a standpoint as well. However, the primary reason why so many governments are hesitant to establish their standpoints on the issue is because the practices of fluoridation and chlorination affect the vast majority of the citizens. Hence, a very clear majority with a fairly passive minority is required. Thus, many governments end up taking potentially extreme stances, often either implementing fluoridation in over half the country, none of the country, or, in cases of compromise, less than 20% of the country. Ultimately, governments that legally ensure their citizens' rights that relate to the issue through the areas of religious freedom, health concerns, and cultural protection have a responsibility to protect the rights of minorities in regards to the addition of substances that are not naturally found in water. However, such countries also have laws to protect freedom of expression. Thus, a strategy to create a compromise that will ensure that the rights of all parties are upheld is an opt-in or out waiver. If a citizen desires to have their water treated with these substances, then they may opt into the government's programs for these services. If a citizen does not desire to use these services, then they may opt out of them. It can be reasonably assumed that a country that would offer such an option would also offer citizens access to accurate, unbiased information regarding the issue so that they may make informed decisions. In many ways, this strategy may be thought of as an informed consent form. Thus, it would include a detailed outline of the process, information regarding the associated risks and benefits, financial obligations, possible alternatives for those who choose to opt out of the programs, and protection from indirect risks associated with the individual's choice, such as insurance companies dropping coverage of a property or an individual. Such a strategy would need to be established as a law, which would likely need to be clearly supported by the cultural and scientific communities of the country. However, several complications would occur with such a law in regards to overlap of opinions and ultimate authority. For example, if a tenant of a property and the owner of a property disagree about whether or not fluoridation and/or chlorination should be implemented, who should have the ultimate authority of the issue? Such concerns and scenarios are important to consider. However, they should not be treated as being impossible to resolve.